ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'm just writing out the disclosure interest now. It's on item 5.4. Are you waving at me?
Kevin.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
go ahead.
The Economic Development Officer's report with the delivery of visitor information services. Again, under the new Conflict of Interest Act, I actually sent a letter to the integrity person to get a ruling on this, because I'm on the board of the Friends of Nancy Island, and they're part of the delivery service. So in abundance of caution, I'm going to declare a conflict of interest until such time as the integrity person tells me. So
Okay.
okay,
Thank you.
I'll put that in writing.
If at some point throughout the meeting anybody else finds that they're in a conflict, please declare it at that time. We have no deputations, presentations, petitions, or public meetings. We have one item under unfinished business. Councillor Wells.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. This item has been sitting here since the fall of 2015. I still believe that we need to develop a beachfront plan, business plan for the beachfront, but I'm not sure how much value this serves or whether we should be just clearing it off. I don't. It was assigned to the previous economic development director. I just don't understand why it's still there at this stage. I think we can direct staff to work with us to create a beachfront management plan, but I think this one's history, and we should just remove it.
And I think once we have the discussion in a couple of weeks as to where we go with our beachfront and what council is thinking, a business plan will be part of those thoughts. So I'll look at the clerk. Can we remove this?
With direction of council, we can.
Do you need a motion to remove it? Or?
I don't believe we do need a motion, but if
Okay.
you would like to move that, then we'll record it. It's
Okay.
fine. I'm not
All
sure
right.
if we've done
If
it in
there's,
the past.
so we can just do a show of hands of who's interested in having that
believe so.
removed. Okay. All right.
With direction to move it.
Direction to remove it. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wells. New business, Beachfront Management Board minutes. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Belanger. Be it resolved that Committee of the Whole received the August 16th, 2018, September 20th, 2018, September 27th, 2018, and October 18th, 2018 Beachfront Management Board meeting minutes from the Chief Administrative Officer as circulated. Is there any questions on these? Councillor Watson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a few on some of the different ones. The meeting of August of 2019. 3A, they talk about appraisals being, obtaining appraisals on properties. Was that ever put in motion to do those? And if so, is there a cost attached to that?
I'll look to the CAO to get that answer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, that was actioned, and the cost, I believe, was in the range of $24,000. I could confirm the precise figure, but that figure rings a bell.
Thank you. And subsequent, number 8A regarding the kiosks. There's a notation here about renewing leases for them and with current people and taking new ones. Was that ever done, or are we on a holding pattern on those? Are they tied up with leases, I guess?
Do you have an answer for that?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll have to confirm that, because those actions took place when I was away. So I'll have to speak with our assistant beachfront property manager to see what the status of that is and get back to you.
Okay, thank you. It may come into play when we have these discussions in a couple of weeks. So if our hands are tied in certain areas. And that's
Absolutely, and I think we will have to have a bigger discussion of moving forward leases, how long, and that will be determined by what direction that we go in. Councillor Wells.
Yeah, I have a number of questions, Your Worship. I'm going to go back to October the 18th minutes. There's a reference there to Craig Gray seeking a leasing with Joystick Arcade, and I believe it was approved according to these minutes, but I guess I'm still just wondering what that status is, whether he had an number of issues that he needed resolved at the time, and you know, is that one still hanging out there for us to deal with, or is there an agreement in place with him for the coming season?
Thank you, Your Worship. I can respond to that. Our assistant beachfront property manager is still in negotiations with Mr. Gray for that site. It's a monetary issue now. There is a difference with respect to what Mr. Gray is prepared to pay and what the town has requested, so they're working through that at this point.
Okay. September 27th, there was a whole closed session about the leases, and I assume at some point we'll find out what was decided in that closed session. September 20th, Mr. Cansari, Nico's Grill, again a closed session. I'm curious as to the status of that building at this point. According to this, it's vacant, I think is what we're getting now, but there was a lease in place, so do we know what its status is at this point in time?
Unfortunately, I don't believe George was here at the time,
No.
and the deputy mayor and I did ask to sit in on those meetings and were declined, so we don't have those answers either,
Okay.
but we'll
Okay.
get them figured out.
And also from September the 20th, there's a reference to the purchasing originally of a a skid steer by Beachfront Management. Then it was to be substituted with a side-by-side ATV and a heavy-duty snow blower. I guess I'm curious as to the status of that, whether that has been purchased or not. I'll be honest, I'm struggling to understand the need for it. Not to question Mr. Dooney, but I guess I am in some ways. And I'll tie it back to a budget issue. When we get to talking budget again, I would like to really strongly see us break the 3% cap at the very least in terms of our budget taxation. And so I'm kind of looking for anywhere where we can save some funds without affecting long-term our operations. I think breaking the 2% or the 3% cap into the 2% range is not out of the question by any imagination. So this is one that I'm looking at and saying, has that been done? Has it been bought, or is it still something that we could revisit and take care of? So it's just, that's the only reason I raise it, is that I'm certain it's a fairly expensive piece of equipment. So
So the treasurer is in the room, she's hearing that. I'm hoping that when we have our budget discussion later on, that she can provide you that answer then.
thank you. August the 16th, Mr. Rattan, as the commercial agent who was I guess consulting with the Beachfront Management Board, recommended that the current way of doing leases was, in his view, not the best way, because it was being rented by space, and that he's strongly recommending that it be on a per square footage basis. And when I read again our Beachfront System Manager's report, our Beachfront Management leases for these spaces run anywhere from $7 a square foot to $84 a square foot. And so I guess we've now directed the CAO to take on administration of or at least the acceptance and administration of the leases with our Beachfront Management assistant. And I guess I'm looking for some assurance that we're going to do something to bring these leases more in line with a per square footage, on a per square footage basis, and something that is much more equitable for the many different people that are leasing. I can understand why a lot of these stores are vacant when we're looking at demanding a lease rate of $44 a square foot, and the next door neighbor is paying $21 a square foot. It just makes no sense to me whatsoever how you can expect to lease to somebody. Also, August the 16th, we've got Burger King, a new 5-year lease requested, but with a lease rate to be established. Chow Pizza, there was a request for a new tenant that was not approved for a 5-year extension. And Perfect Image, there was a new 5-year lease with a 5-year option. again, a lease rate still to be established. I think we need to get these out of the way. I'm really saying this for the CAO's benefit. But also in the perfect image when it refers to exclusivity provisions. And I would be very much interested in knowing what the exclusivity provisions are that is being given to one particular leaseholder. Another question out of these minutes, motorcycle rally, do we know the current status of that? There was 2 meetings held with the motorcycle organization, but I have nothing that tells me what the current status of our motorcycle rally, and to me that's an extremely important event in this town. It is the end of February, so I don't want to see this left until May to start deciding whether it's coming back to town or not.
So before you move off of that one, if it's okay with the committee, Chris is in the audience, do you have the answer to that?
Good afternoon, everybody. We are currently in discussions. On August 28th, 2018, Council approved the motorcycle rally for a new weekend in August. Since then, the organizer attempted to sell the rally. He has a branding naming rights. And we are currently in discussions, literally down to the day, and we're trying to prepare a report for next council meeting on Tuesday, 22nd of February. So there is possibly more negotiation beyond the approval that was given with council, but those details are, I don't have any kind of final deal at this point, but we're working towards that date in August, and that's our number one objective.
Okay, so the original discussion was that it was going to leave town. Then there was some discussion about maybe not all of it leaving town, part of it leaving town. So are we at least discussing it returning to town as an event in town? Is that the basis of the discussions?
Definitely. So there was a scare in late summer that the event would be canceled for 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, we worked with the operator and came up with a solution that worked on an amicable date, and the town actually offered to make a sponsorship of $5,000, and the operation or the event was settled. Recently, it came to our attention that the rally was to be sold, so we knew that things were moving. And as recently as last week, I had to sit down with the organizer because he is starting to say, I cannot sell it, I may wish to close it. Now, if there's another piece that you've heard about moving, there is common knowledge that our organizer has purchased property at the Edenvale Airport and is working on other special events in that site, and that I am certain has bearing on how the event will happen in Wasaga Beach. But it's my understanding that the participants who visit for this year, which will be year number 5, are most interested in going to the waterfront, but I'm not certain whether it's a viable option for this current operator to run the event, and that's what we're trying to work through and bring forward a report to council as soon as possible.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
It's all very recent. Honestly,
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about it moving. I'm only going by what I read in the minutes, and it seemed to be left up in the air, and that's what I'm trying to just
That's
sure that
so
we're-
that was the last scare, and now we're literally in week 2 of the current scare. I think we're doing our best to make it happen. It was very well received, and we've had lots of positive feedback from the beachfront vendors, et cetera, in the previous round.
Yeah.
But the August plan is now again in flux.
Okay, keep us in the loop. Thanks. Did you have any
The
more?
kiosks, we're initiating new 2-year leases. Is there escape clauses in those leases in the event that we wish to make any changes to the Main Street Market setup or organization of the Main Street Market, or is there a?
I believe all the leases, there is just basically a buyout.
Okay, I see
but-
George nodding
yeah.
yes. So.
Yes.
Okay,
But again, I think all of those will tie into, I think, some future discussions, George, that we
Yeah.
as a council need to have.
I just I'm just going by what I'm reading, that they were going to initiate new 2-year leases. So I just want to be sure that we have an option to go forward on that basis, or a change basis if we feel it necessary. And my last point from August 16th is a beach chair rental. The Beachfront Management Board approved a beach equipment rental, 3 years, $6,000 a season for 2019, subject to reference and licensing.
And I
Do we
don't
have a
believe any-
status on that?
Yeah, I don't believe that that was finalized, and George, if you wanted to touch on that, I think you let them know that there might not be a desire of council to go forward next year having the beach, so.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, that's correct. As we've advised the prospective tenant that council will be reviewing its agreement with Ontario Parks with respect to beach maintenance, and that the result of that review will be in the next month or so, and they will be advised. So we haven't moved any further on that lease.
Now, this is for 2019. And my understanding is we are in that arrangement at least for 2019. So this could still be a valid, and even if we were not in that arrangement, is there anything to prevent somebody from operating the off of a leased property from the town, leasing property from the town, operating this, and the people carry the, whatever it is, down to the beachfront? I still think it's a viable opportunity, just depending on the terms.
And I think there
that
was
we set up.
discussions at the Beachfront Management Board level about, do you carry them across the road and onto the beach and all of that, so I think the operator will have to make a determination, is it worth
So it's,
them investing the money in something that they may or may not be able to do next year.
so it's one more of those we don't know yet.
Don't know.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. I'm done for that, for this part.
Okay. Councillor Kinney?
Your Worship, to Councillor Wells' comment about the ATV, that reoccurs back in the second budget, item number 58, just, and the 57, and the cost quoted here is 30,000.
And I'm not sure though if that was cut from the second one or not, so when Jocelyn comes back, we can ask her later on in the agenda for that. Any other questions on those minutes? Okay, I've already read the motion. It's been a while. Do you need me to reread it? Oh, sorry, wrong side.
Thank you, Worship. We'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Foster?
In favor.
Councillor Kinney?
In favor?
Councillor Watkin?
In favor.
Councillor Wells?
In favor.
Mayor Byfolchi in favor. Vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
Next, we have a verbal update from our Public Works Director, Kevin, with regard to the EA.
Thank you, Your Worship. So as committee is aware, we did present the recommendation to award the RFP for the consulting services to initiate the environmental assessment for Main Street as well as Beach Area 1 and 2. And I don't necessarily have a slideshow per se. I got a few photos that I'll highlight. Just by way of background, the Downtown Development Master Plan was initiated and approved over the course of the last term of council. And although there was extensive public consultation and engagement in advance of facilitating or initiating the detailed design for any of the corridor improvements, the road improvements along Main Street, Molesey Street, and Beach Area 1 and 2, we need to ensure that we've satisfied the requirements under the Environmental Assessment Act. And so there are a number of elements that we still need to address through the EA. And as such, we issued the RFP. The RFP, as you're aware, is based on the Downtown Development Master Plan. It's based on the urban design guidelines that were approved. And it highlights this particular area. So you're looking River Road West, Main Street, from River Road West across the bridge to Molesey Street, and then continuing westerly, or I guess southwesterly, towards 6th Street. and any road improvements required need to satisfy the EA process. So at the, I guess it was the December Public Works Committee meeting, we had made a recommendation to award the EA to a consultant, and it was put on pause or on hold until I know there was some additional information required by committee and council as it relates to the downtown development master plan, official plan policies, and I am returning to, I guess, seek some direction on advancing that. What I can add is you know, this EA is good for 10 years, and this area is identified as an urban node, regardless of the status of the downtown development master plan. If we do consider advancing any road improvements throughout this area, Beach Area 1 and 2 or Main Street, we need to undertake the EA. Now, if council decides to perhaps focus on Beach Area 1 and 2, this EA will still address those issues. This EA will still allow us to initiate detailed design, evaluate just how we're going to treat or address Beach Drive, because there are wave uprush and natural hazard issues that we need to be mindful of in advance of the detailed design in terms of the position of Beach Drive, the elevation of Beach Drive. And so regardless of, I guess, the status of the master plan, you know, this EA will still be able to be leveraged to advance some of those details. Yeah, I guess if there's any questions, at the end of the day, it's council's position in terms of whether we want to advance it or not. But we have the consultant on hold, and they're willing to kind of maintain certainly their proposal until a decision is made.
Okay, and council, again, we put it on hold until we can kind of wrap our minds around where things were at. But again, we will be having a discussion about Beach Areas 1 and 2. I think what Kevin is saying is if there's any intent of developing in that area, we need to have this information. It is good for 10 years, so it's not like it's something that goes bad. We have some time to utilize it. Councillor Watson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Going back to your, that one there. Those 7 little dots along there, are they all roundabouts? Is that what they're denoting, or is it just intersections?
So as part of, because there was a focus on intersection improvements through the downtown development master plan, and specifically the roundabout at Beck Street, there was some discussion around consideration for roundabouts at River Avenue Crescent, at Spruce Street. We wanted to make sure that through the terms of reference, we had those simulations and the modeling identified for those particular intersections. We actually added all 7 intersections, and the consultant is going to be required to evaluate the capacity and the function and the efficiency of these intersections as both a roundabout and a signalized intersection. And so we wanted to have these defined within the terms of reference in case we came back to the consultant and said, okay, you've evaluated the capacity of this intersection, now evaluate it assuming a roundabout. We wanted worst case scenario in our terms of reference. So this isn't suggesting they are all going to be roundabouts. This is simply suggesting that we will be having the consultant evaluate the capacity and the level of service for all these intersections. And a roundabout may be appropriate and a roundabout may not be appropriate. But we wanted to ensure that they were evaluating the traffic flow and the impacts of the side streets associated with whatever treatment may result through the EA process.
Follow up?
Yes, I have a couple. Thank you, Your Worship. So that was my thought, because I see under the transportation and traffic analysis part, they talk about roundabouts and lanes of traffic, because I know at one point there was talk of reducing from 4 to 2, all these things. Should there be input from council when they're doing this study, or are we just going to take it that they're going to bring out all these different scenarios for us to react to? Because I'm seeing specific things in this now.
Sure. So this is like any typical EA. It's a public process again, and it's open to everyone, council, residents, visitors, and we'll have 2 public information sessions. The consultant will be looking at, again, through the downtown master plan, this was identified as a 2-lane road. So the consultant will evaluate the implications of reducing a 4-lane road down to 2 lanes. and looking at the challenges associated with that, or looking at our current and projected traffic volumes and to see if we can accommodate that through perhaps a 3-lane cross-section rather than a 4. Because the 4 lanes is for, obviously when we design roads, it's for an average daily traffic of, upwards of 20,000 cars. Our ADT for Main Street might be 4,500 cars. So a lot of the traffic was obviously one of the largest concerns and focus for us as we went through the Downtown Development Master Plan, and this EA will highlight or address those challenges, specifically with intersections, route cutting, and what the implications of reducing 4 to 2 will have through that corridor. And again, the EA, once it's cleared, implementation doesn't necessarily have to happen immediately. As you know, we initiated the EA for River Road West in 2008, 2009, and that was from Brillinger to the east end of town. Well, over the course of the last several years, we've staged the design and the construction, and we can do the very same thing here in terms of staging design for Beach Area 1 and 2 and construction accordingly. And then later on, through the term of the EA, we can revisit or reevaluate Main Street.
Go ahead.
And that gets me down to my second last question. That part was the question, will this get us in a position to be, as they say, shovel ready for grants by doing this, so that we're in a little better position? Because obviously, even though it seemed to be broadcast that there was government money for all this, there was none. There never was any. And will this help us get there by investing this kind of money?
Yes, so certainly, as you may know, any of the funding programs that we've seen in recent years, there are deadlines and timelines associated with implementation and substantial completion. Usually it's around 2 to 3 years. For us to be in a position to be shovel ready, the EA would have to be cleared, the designs would have to be complete, and the approvals would have to be readily available. So there's kind of 3 other stages that we need to satisfy before we are in that position. And the biggest challenge is going to be really Beach Drive and what that is going to look like and how we're going to protect Beach Drive or raise or relocate. There are some challenges associated with the natural hazards down there. So certainly the EA helps get us to a point where we're shovel ready for funding. And then when we do come to that point, there's other competing priorities for funding as well in terms of arterial road improvements, drainage improvements. So it'll be another discussion for council when those funding programs surface, but this positions us better for that.
You have one more?
Yeah, the very last one. Usually you would think the developers would pay for this and not us, but would there be a chance to recoup any of these by front-ending some of these costs when we end up with a developer or several to work on this project?
Hopefully. I think if
Good
we're
answer, Kevin.
yeah, obviously if we can leverage those funds, we will, because the development charge component associated with some of these improvements isn't as high as you would typically see in our other road improvement strategies. But I think if the design is complete, there's an opportunity to have the developers integrate the frontage improvements associated with their development. So in terms of a phasing strategy or block by block strategy, by having the EA and the designs done, there's an opportunity to leverage the improvements they need. There's an opportunity to leverage, because in some cases they will need a storm sewer outlet, and there's downstream upgrades that will be required. So there definitely is some opportunity, and we'll explore those. I don't have that defined answer for you right now, Councillor, but we always look to leverage other people's money, so to speak.
Thank you.
Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Your Worship. George, as Councillor Watson has hit on a number of them, but I just, when we're looking at this, I look at it and I go, it's to approve the EA process is like an overarching, we're just going to have a look at this area and do all that. And there's good sections in there, natural environment, cycling, walking, cultural heritage. There's all kinds of good stuff. My concern, and I think it was probably why previously we kind of put this on pause, is to sit there and say that the downtown master plan, I'm not sure I believe in a lot of, or in certain segments of it. They going down to 2 lanes and the 7 traffic circles or roundabouts. You know, there's other issues, but again, I get the idea that if we can get this and it prepares us and says, you know, this is traffic flows and this is pedestrian movements and this is green spaces we're keeping or getting rid of, or potentially, I get that. I understand the value of that. What I just don't want to do though is and I want kind of reassurance on this, is to just sit there and say, well, if we do that, then they're going to move ahead with the DDMP and the urban design guidelines, because that's another discussion. And again, you know, we can have it. I know we'll have it later. I'm not pretending we'll have it now, but I want to make sure that they're mutually exclusive, and that's my point. You know, if we're moving ahead with this, is that just one step on a slippery slope that's going to lead to something?
Right. We want to make sure that what we're asking for isn't based on a plan that the majority sitting around this table don't agree with. Are we putting something forward and saying, base it on the downtown master plan as it sits today, which included a roundabout and going down to 2 streets or 2 lanes? Or do we need to revamp that to say, we're happy with 4 lanes, is that okay to carry on with other things?
Is it
that what you're-
transferable? Is it transferable? So we have one proposal there, and there are parts of it I know that many of us will not agree with, and many of us will agree with lots of it. But is it something that we can pick up from that and say, hey, you know, we don't want 7 roundabouts? And I'm not precluding that. I'm just, you know, if we don't want that, or we don't want, I don't know, the 4 lanes versus 3 versus 2, can it be transferred from one to the other, or is it exclusive only to the downtown master plan and the urban design guideline as proposed under the?
Okay, so before, Your Worship, and I know Councillor Wells will highlight this, so I will make that comment. The terms of reference, as you see within the, you know, your agenda package, the terms of reference are specific to the DDMP and the urban design guidelines. And it's specific to the limits, it's specific to the concepts, right? So we have Main Street, and this is approved in our OP right now, and the UDGs suggest the same, a 30-meter road allowance from Beck Street to the bridge. So there's property acquisitions, whether it be through site plan control, it doesn't necessarily mean, you know, expropriation, but there's strategies that need to be developed for that. We've defined a corridor conceptually for Main Street and Beach Drive in terms of it being 23-meter road allowance. These principles are what is driving the EA, and we do have some limitations, right? Like, so Beck Street right now, or Main Street from Beck to Main is 20 meters. So, you know, to satisfy the UDG, and again, whether it's through site plan control and development over the course of time, we effectively need to acquire 5 meters each side of the road. Mosley Street between the bridge and First Street, it's 12 to 14 meters, and the UDGs and the official plan highlight a 23-meter road allowance. Similarly, it was 1st to 3rd, Spruce Street, again, it's Beach Drive 15 meters. So there are some challenges with the road allowance, but the EA will define strategies to plan for how to acquire or how to perhaps stage improvements until acquisition is possible. Again, that's the EA will filter out those details, but I think to make a long story longer, Councillor, this EA is based on the Downtown Development Master Plan and the Urban Design Guidelines, and it's also based on the approved OP policies that highlight corridor improvements.
Okay. Councillor Kenny?
I just wanted to say, worship to Kevin, and I think he just answered my question that Councillor Foster was saying about the EA being flexible. My initial thought process was, and Kevin, you might be able to update me on this. An EA is needed for that area in some format to move ahead with development. Not this EA, but an EA as we would look at it is needed for that to be developed.
So the EA is required, it's not specific to how the development will take place on the blocks or the properties. It's really specific to the road allowance. So under the Environmental Assessment Act, there's project-specific and cost thresholds that dictate what schedule of EA you follow. So in this particular case, we have proposed road improvements, right? Streetscaping, widening. We've got, pedestrian facilities, improved boulevard streetscaping. When we look at a road project and confirm that, that the cost threshold is going to exceed, I believe it's $2.4 million. It elevates kind of the stage of what schedule it's going to be. The fact that we believe this is certainly going to exceed $2.4 million per the EA requirements, but not only that, but there's also going to be environmental impact associated with the land acquisitions or the land road allowance strategies around implementing this. So the fact that we have exceeded the cost threshold in terms of what schedule, as well as the environmental impact associated with more of the property impacts, that's why we're advancing to Schedule C. But that doesn't mean you can't build on Playland parking lot or on 3rd Street or 2nd Street. It just means we can't advance any of those streetscaping improvements within this is road allowance specific, not development specific.
Okay.
If that answers your question.
Thank you.
I think I'm just going to go to the CAO. I think you might have a suggestion.
Thank you,
Or
Worship. Just have two questions actually for Kevin. One has to do with the EA, and because of the lands of which it abuts, specifically the beach, which is owned by Ontario Parks, the province, will this EA meet their EA requirements for their purposes, internal purposes, if there's works? And what I'm relating that to is, if you look at that photo, I think if you go back to that photo, one of the issues on the Beach Drive photo, one of the issues that we've had relating to Beach Drive over many years is the sand blowing off the beach. And I see in that concept there's a little bit of a kind of a knee wall there, if that's clear. I think that's what that is there. So that kind of abuts the beach. And I'm just curious with respect to, I don't see it actually in language in here, but if that's part of it, does the terms of reference meet the provincial guidelines for their assessment process? And is that aspect of the concept included in the EA? Thank you.
George.
Kevin?
Good question, George. So if we can accommodate Beach Drive improvements solely within the town road allowance, that's including drainage and all of those other features, then no, we don't need to advance a Provincial Park and Conservation Reserves Act Class EA. However, as soon as we occupy or construct any infrastructure within and on their property, you now need to follow a separate stream. We have attempted to blend the two for many EAs in recent years, and it's been effective. This particular EA, certainly if it's evident that we need to occupy or improve facilities on Ontario Park, within Ontario Park's boundary, that will be highlighted through the EA, and it will require potentially another EA to satisfy the PPCRA.
Thank you. Just a supplementary. Thank you, Your Worship. Just if for example, council does decide that it's that it wishes to construct some sort of wall or barrier between the sand and the road at some point in the future. This EA will allow that to take place without a further EA, or will a further EA be required as part of this process?
They will need to satisfy the Provincial Parks and Conservation Reserves Act Class EA. This will not. Elements of this will help support the information they need, but they effectively will need to do their screening, and they will need to satisfy themselves that it clears their EA. So based on the blended EAs we've had in the past, this will not satisfy that, and that will require further discussion with MNRF and Ontario Parks, MECP, whichever stream that is now. But certainly any improvement on and within the park boundary must go through their own screening process, and that all falls under the Provincial Parks and Conservation Reserves Act, not the municipal class EA.
Okay, so I had a couple more hands up here. I do want to toss it out here for thought though, Kevin. Based on the conversation going on here, if council was to choose to go a different direction, we'd have to come up with new terms and go out for a new RFP, correct?
I guess it depends on the scope. Once we have that discussion, we would certainly, ideally, we could leverage what we've done and then maintain the consultants we have selected. But if that doesn't work, then yeah, we would simply go out for another proposal, and maybe it is to satisfy the Provincial Parks and Conservation Reserve Act to prioritize Beach Drive instead of the rest, but this would not satisfy that.
All right, we'll go to Councillor Wells, and then I've got Councillor Boulanger.
I think Joe was ahead of me.
Oh,
Your
okay,
Worship.
vice versa.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, Kevin, just informally around the previous council, I know there was some discussion related to mitigation of possible traffic issues related to the direction of Beach Drive, and whether it be related to development or traffic, that there could even be the consideration of the elimination of one or two of the cross streets. Like, would that be something that would be looked at within the EA or be a consideration?
Certainly traffic flow in the area is, and we have looked at kind of flow patterns and direction in Beach Area 1 and 2. There was no clear direction provided with reference to eliminating road allowances through there. So that, if that is, the intent, we would have to, we would have the consultants model that and consider that. But as of the current terms of reference, it's simply based on maintaining spruce first, second, and third. But that's something that could be easily
Right, I'm just
evaluated
wondering
from a
if it was
transportation
flexible, because depending on what council decides, redevelopment, like, I mean, obviously, some of those streets are fairly close together and they do create traffic issues, more so with the direction of Beach Drive now if it was reversed, but because they're always crossing, we tend to have a lot of vehicles like to do the loop a number of times, and they're always crossing traffic to go in and they're crossing traffic to come out, whereas if you go the other direction, they're just flowing into the lane, right?
Well, we've had an assessment done on the flow of traffic and the major movements and the major turning movements, and I seem to recall the consultants had suggested the current structure is the most appropriate given the major turning movements. But I can share that again,
Yeah.
Council.
Just, it was informal, so, thank you.
Councillor Wells?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think much of what I'm thinking has been said, although I've never been one not to say it again. So, first of all, I just want to say I'm all for development on Main Street, and I'm all for development on Beach Drive. Anything I have to say is nothing anti the development. I guess my concern with this, and it's the reason I asked for it to be deferred the first time, is simply because of the basis on which it's being put out there and going forward. And I had this discussion briefly with Kevin before the meeting, so he's well prepared with an answer. This EA as it stands, is based on a specific plan. It's specifically designed as an EA to provide the details and the background and the underlying issues related to a very specific plan, which in my mind may not proceed, given some of the discussions we've had. And so therefore I have to wonder why we're proceeding with it as it is currently designed. I look to the section 3, the background as it's listed in here. Downtown revitalization details are to be consistent with the downtown development master plan. One of the major is to create a user-friendly street for all modes of transportation, et cetera, et cetera. Very specific to a particular plan in conjunction with the vision of the downtown. Well, that's a previous vision, which again may or may not be a go-forward circumstance. I go to the evaluation framework, and it talks about transportation network capacity. I don't have an issue with that. Parking capacity, fine. Intersection operations, fine. But again, if you start going through and looking at the components of the RFP under the evaluation framework, it's very much focused on, quote, the downtown master plan, and either justifying it or saying, no, here are some issues that you have to resolve in order to proceed with it. I guess what I want to hear from Kevin, and I'm quite prepared to allow this to go forward, as long as I had, and I'm struggling to see that he can say this, but by proceeding, we're not developing an EA that puts limits on our options for Main Street and Beach Drive. That should we change our direction, that in fact this EA is not going to satisfy the needs to proceed in any kind of a different direction than what's currently out there. So I don't know whether whether we modify it in some way so that it's not locked into the current downtown master plan, but is rather a more open-ended EA that gives us options for the necessity for development on both Main Street and Beach Drive. And I'm also concerned that if we go forward with it as it's laid out there, we are potentially creating a preconception within the public that in fact this is council's direction is to proceed with the downtown master plan as it's currently written. So for those issues, I don't know whether we can change the terms of reference without going to a new RFP. That's something that experts have to tell me. I'm quite comfortable with doing an EA assessment that is going to tell us what we can or cannot do on Beach Drive or Main Street as an open-ended opportunities for development, for revamping road allowances, for revamping things. But I guess my key word again is that it's open-ended and not restricted into a specific plan that is, in my view, not necessarily going to proceed. So I'm happy to support it if I can be assured that we're not wasting money by doing an EA that's locked into some plan that has some question to it.
So I think that the one important thing leaving here today is that even if we don't agree with moving forward in this fashion, I think we need to have money in the budget to do so. That is a piece that we have to keep in there. The question is, are we tying our hands for development on Beach 1 to do anything different than what's been proposed or the downtown as to what it is today by moving forward with it as is?
Again, Your Worship, this is specific to the road allowances. Now, when you talk about development, I'm assuming you're talking about the parcels of land and how they will build. They're not related from our standpoint. But if council have a different direction, you're right, it does not make sense to advance this EA until we understand what direction we want to go. And it may be a different, like this is cross-sectional based on the UDGs and then the master plan. And I think if we want to perhaps shift and look more at, you know, whether it's shoreline or some coastal engineering assessments of Beach Drive and how we will assess that and how that will flow into the future design. That's another option, but I think if
This road
council
network
have-
would have to be looked at exactly like this, doesn't matter what buildings we put on these properties.
correct.
This process would have to happen, and the process that we're going through will not tie our hands, though, to how we do these other things, unless we're looking at moving the roads, correct?
Correct. If you want to start moving the road allowances and deviate from what's been identified, that's something we would certainly need to know. So when we do initiate the EA, then that is communicated from the outset, and there's opportunity for comment on that. But in terms of the transportation, the traffic analysis, the intersection analysis, and the flow capacities through this corridor, it's predominantly based on the build-out projections from the downtown development master plan. So if we don't see those densities, it's going to be conservative. But in terms of how they will model and simulate the intersections and the traffic through these corridors throughout the 20-year period, 25-year period, it's based on those projections from the DDMP.
Okay, Councillor Wells?
Yeah, I guess, put it in the specifics, I guess, if I'm hearing it correctly, this EA is specific to a cross-section road that reduces Main Street from 4 down to 2. That's really what I'm hearing, is that this is all about the reduction of Main Street and a few other items, but just using that as one example, this is specific to reducing Main Street from 4 lanes to 2. And I guess that is something that I'm not prepared to support if that's the focus of even that section of this RFP. If you tell me that it's designed to tell me what I can do if I leave it as 4 lanes, what I can do or not do if I go to 3 lanes, what I can do or not do if I go to 2 lanes, then that's a different story. But that's not what I'm hearing.
Okay, Your Worship. So again, it's based on the concept of downtown.
Of a 2-lane road.
However, through the EA, and again, implementation can happen in the future, and through the EA, we can identify staged, we can identify a pilot for a road diet to evaluate a 3-lane cross-section with on-road bike lanes. It doesn't necessarily mean we're advancing this strategy, but the Main Street corridor from from River Road through to the bridge is a third of this assignment, and the focus is based on the concepts considered through the urban design guidelines.
So as to take it from 4 lanes down to the 2.
When council deems it time to make those improvements, right? So there's
the
always
question, or the thing is though, the majority of people sitting at this table don't support making it 2 lanes. They support keeping it 4. Do we need to change it, or 3, but do we need to change these terms?
I would suggest we do.
Okay.
But I think, just to be clear and consistent, I would suggest we do and reissue the RFP based on that premise, not tying it to the DDMP and the UDG. But there's some other decisions, I guess, that need to be made, because there has been some approvals associated with those corridors and those improvements proposed for that corridor.
Okay, so I've got Deputy Mayor Bray and then Councillor Watson, but I think at the end of those comments, I think we need to move forward with something. And I think what I'm hearing is that we should ensure that we keep something in the budget to do this process, but that we would need something to come back that we can, that fits more with what we're doing now. Deputy Mayor Bray.
Predominantly with my comments, I'd like to see it in the budget, but that if we could defer the final details for the RFP and kind of the scope of the project until we've had the discussions around this table to see that, what we would like to see go forward at Beach 1 and on Main Street.
Okay, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Your Worship. In addition to the 2-lane, 4-lane question, I also see issues that you had a slide up earlier about some of the proposed road allowances through some different streets there, and I think the comment was made that you know, we may have to purchase or expropriate up to 5 meters on either side of these allowances. Now, I see that as a fatal flaw in this whole plan. On some of these areas that you're talking about trying to get that, the time and the legals involved, if you're not having willing partners to do it, you have to start expropriating. So money, I'm for the money in the budget, but not as it's going forward either at this point. It has to. I think that's a real flaw in the plan trying to do that.
Kevin?
Yeah, just to clarify, yeah, expropriation would be, you know, the last resort. And my focus when I made the comment was to accommodate those dedications through site plan control, which could be a long time before some of these properties apply or redevelop, at which point we would have the policies in place, the Environmental Assessment Act in place, to have those dedications towards the road allowance through site plan. But yeah, we never like to propose expropriation, but comment certainly noted.
Okay, CAO is just working on some wording here. So I think it's important that it keeps moving forward, but we need to give the proper terms. Table.
Thank you, Worship. So there would be some slight changes to the wording of this motion to try to capture what I hear council members saying, and then we'd add an additional paragraph. So the motion hasn't been read yet, so I'll defer to the clerk. Am I free to make some changes to this to try to capture what council is considering?
Yes, with agreement of the mover and the seconder, I think we can.
So the way the motion reads now is as per your report, and it talks about that include the Main Street Class E8 project as part of the 2019 capital budget. So I would change the word "the" to an "a," include a Main Street, and I would add the word "and Beach Drive area." So Beach Drive, include a Main Street and Beach Drive area Class E8 project as part of the 2019 budget. So it would be there. And then, and further, that the details of the proposed EA return to committee for discussion. And does that capture committee's views?
Anybody have concerns with that? I think it keeps it in the budget and it has the terms coming back. Kevin?
Sorry if I may. So it will come back following council's decision on direction. It's not staff proposing what they want.
I believe council's going to start having discussions in the next couple of weeks about the beachfront. We'll have a better idea then. Councillor Wells?
I don't have a problem with it coming back anytime, as early as tomorrow, if the terms become open-ended in the sense that it provides for options across the streetscapes of Main Street and Beach Drive, but it's open-ended, and that the EA looks at options rather than focusing on one particular focus.
Clean slate, not tied to the downtown master plan as it sits today.
Yeah, just
so
wide
if
open.
we just took the area and said this area could be developed one day, what do we need? Can we do that?
We'll evaluate that and we'll bring some options forward.
Okay, Councillor Belanger?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question to Kevin. Do these changes require additional budgetary requirements versus, like we have a lot of diagrams and a lot of information that was already put together. So, and I'm not disputing the options, but is there enough in the budget to accommodate what we have to do if we change the downtown master plan to something else? Like I'm assuming there's quite a bit of work went into that.
So from the EA standpoint, right now, I believe it's solely being drawn from reserves, so there is no taxation impact. When we go back out, depending on the scope of the terms of reference, now the competing consultants have an idea of where the numbers will end up, so we may see a tighter budget. I can't really confirm whether or not it'll be more or less. I would assume it's going to be close to what it is now. There is provision within the EA for them to evaluate different concepts, but that was more geared around the established cross-section. So I would assume it's going to be fairly consistent with what it is now, Councillor.
Thank you.
Okay, so the motion will read that the Committee of the Whole received a verbal update from the Director of Public Works pertaining to the Main Street Class EA background for information. Further, that Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that it include a Main Street and Beach Drive area Class EA project as part of the 2019 capital budget, and further that details of the proposed EA return to Council for discussion. Does that capture? And the original motion was moved by Councillor Belanger and seconded by Councillor Kinney. Are you okay with those changes? Okay, all right.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger.
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Bray.
Excuse me.
Oh, she's
In
got a-
favor.
She's eating something.
Councillor Foster.
In favor?
Councillor Kinney.
In favor.
Councillor Watson.
In favor.
Councillor Wells.
In favor?
Mayor Van Holten.
In favor.
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. Motion is carried.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank
Um,
you, he says lightly.
Very politely.
Next is the motion with regard to group benefits. It's moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Belanger. The Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that it receive the update from Mosey and Mosey, the town's benefit consultants pertaining to group benefits renewal rates for full-time employees, members of council, retirees, and dependents. And further, that Council approved the renewal with Great West Life for 2019 at an increased premium of $24,297. And further, that it allocate $58,524 of the refund deposit account balance. Current total is $108,524. Generated under the Benefit Management Program to the Administration Reserve, with $50,000 of the surplus being maintained in the account to offset potential future increased costs. Did you want to add to your report, or are you there just for questions?
I just assumed
That
there
there'd
any
be
questions?
Okay, is there any questions of Denise? Oh, run Denise,
We'll
run.
call for the vote. Councillor Belanger.
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Bray.
In favor.
Councillor Foster.
In favor?
Councillor Kinney.
In favor.
Councillor Watson.
In favor?
Councillor Wells.
In favor?
Mayor Van Holten.
In favor?
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
Next, we have Economic Development Officer's report. It's moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Belanger. Be it resolved that Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that it extend the transition agreement with the Chamber of Commerce for the provision of visitor information services until September 30th, 2019, and that the Town of Wasaga Beach staff work with the Chamber of Commerce to operate the Visitor Information Center at 550 River Road West and a beachfront visitor information center, including a mobile unit on a trial basis for the 2019 summer season, which is option number 2 in the report. Questions or comments? Oh, I've noticed, sorry, Councillor Foster has pushed away from the table. Councillor Wells?
Just a question of, if somebody can answer, what's the impact of this on the arrangement that we currently have with the Chamber of Commerce, where we provide something in the neighborhood of $40,000 to the Chamber as a fee for service for doing the tourist thing? So what, and also the office, we supply the building and some $40,000 if I remember correctly. So this option, what is the impact on the Chamber, and what is the impact to us? Is there a reduced amount going to the Chamber on a fee for service? Does it affect their occupation of the building in any way, shape, or form?
I don't see Ellen. Are you able to answer that?
So Ellen, hopefully she's on her way down.
She's on her way down.
Yeah, so it,
Here she goes.
Oh, she's fast. Did you?
Sorry. I thought I was up there.
Okay. I'll just get you to ask the question again.
don't remember, I'm sorry.
You forget.
No, I'm curious, the option 2, which you've recommended, the impact on the Chamber of Commerce, both in terms of the funding that we provide to them for this service, and their use of the building basically on a $2 annual rental basis. So option 2, we're taking over a significant amount of the tourism side of it from the Chamber. Is there an economic impact to the Chamber as a respect to the fee for service we provide, or for the use of the building? Is there any difference in terms of the arrangement for the building use by the Chamber?
Well, as I understand it through you, Madam Mayor, and to George, the Chamber would be allowed to continue to operate out of that building, because that was an original agreement that didn't have anything really to do with the Visitor Information Center service. With respect to taking the service back, I believe that that's really started with them, that they're changing their strategic plan and wanting to focus more on business strategy and support for local business rather than delivering visitor information.
Okay. But we're still going to be, and I'm not arguing against it, but I just want to understand, we're still going to be paying them the same fee for service as we have in the past, even though they are only taking on a portion of the service?
No, we will not be paying them the same fee. It would be a reduced fee.
Okay. All right. And just to follow up, there's a reference in I'm trying to think of the Economic Development Officer's name that you are filling
Johanna
in
Griggs.
for Johanna. There's a reference in her notes, in one of her reports, that the community policing office is sort of barely used. And I guess I'm assuming from what I've read, there is no impact with this proposal to the community policing office, which is attached to the Chamber office. This doesn't have any impact, because I know for a fact that the community policing office is well used, so I was shocked to see the reference in that report that it's barely used, and suggested that by innuendo that it really wasn't necessary to maintain it. So this has no impact on the community policing's use of the building.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm sorry, I can't really answer that question.
Okay. I'm happy to go forward as long as, as long as there's an understanding that this isn't going to affect the community policing office.
Thank you, Worship. I can confirm that it will have no effect on the
Okay.
community policing office.
Thank you.
Councillor Watson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess this may tie in with this report, and maybe a little later when we do the reorganization of economic development. And I'm glad that this come forward, that we have a bit of a transition period to think about it. We need to discuss, like I'm struggling with what the Chamber is going to become. I guess they've been 80 years in business this year and doing what they do, and it's sounding like they want to go in a different direction. I'm just wondering how that's going to look going forward if we take the tourism component back and where they might operate out of. I know somewhere along the line we're talking about that property maybe being sold, or there was a start of that a couple of years ago. So just
Yeah. Did you want to address?
Through you, Madam Mayor, in earlier conversations with the Chamber executive, they are toying with the idea of moving to another location, although no plans are in place. At the last, unless they have to, right? If they have a space, I think they want to stay there. At the last board meeting, they went in camera to talk about strategic planning and this relationship. So they really are going through a process right now that they're trying to understand how they possibly should redefine themselves and what service that they've been offering. It's sort of a great time because it's their 80th anniversary, so that opens opportunities to revisit the Chamber services. I think that this second option is a good option because it gives both organizations some transition time to figure out what works best. And we really could go with any of the three options. But the Chamber has not told us whether they really want to continue but they're open to conversation. That's where we are now.
Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Bray?
Thank you. For those who weren't on the last term of council, there was a review of the visitor services, and we kind of looked at who should provide them and at what cost and whether it should be in-house. So what you're seeing now is the tail end of a 3-year kind of weaning agreement with the chamber, so that they've known for 3 years that this was going to be transitioned somewhere else. The question that I think still remains is, can the town provide the service any cheaper than an outside group? I'm not sure that, as an employer, that we can run this service any more efficiently or any less expensive than subcontracting out. So for me, there might be contract positions in there or subcontractors or something. I'm not sure that just automatically bringing it in-house is the right answer. So in terms of expanding it till the end of the summer, I think that's great, because it'll give this council time to actually figure out what the new face of visitor services should be, because I think that industry has changed radically since the 80-year visitor center where people are picking up maps. So.
Anyone else? Councillor Wells?
Yeah, just a quick question, I guess, for the CAO. One of the recommendations we're going to see shortly in the reorganization is for splitting of the economic development officers into 2 areas, one small business development, the other tourism development officer. When I read the duties for the proposed duties around the tourism development officer, it appears that many of those duties are currently managed in some way by the Chamber of Commerce on our behalf. So I'm just looking at this transition period. What will be the impact on, should we proceed with the splitting of the roles, what will be the impact on our tourism development officer, and what will be the impact on the Chamber of Commerce, and how will these two work together to provide that service during this transition period?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'll defer to Ellen and she can respond to the question.
I think realistically what the chamber is delivering now is answering phone and email inquiries and housing brochures on site. A lot of that tourism development officer work will be around executing the tourist destination management plan, which goes much further than the offerings of the chamber. And I'm not speaking about the summer program at the kiosk where they're really hands-on and meeting with folks there, but I think that the tourist development officer has a really heavy workload.
So there won't be a conflict during this transition period. There's no conflict between the role of the tourism development officer and the role that the Chamber of Commerce is fulfilling for us.
No, sir, I don't think so.
Okay.
I feel that we're working really well, collaborating with the chamber. We're attending the board meetings and building strong relationships.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Belanger, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, well, thank you, Risha. I was just going to say that I think it was in the documentation, but the visitor guidebook is still managed by the chamber, and that's quite a financial benefit for them. So that's been maintained. So.
Okay, any other questions of Ellen? Okay, I've already read the motion. We'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Foster? No. Oh, whoops, he's pushed away, sorry. Councillor Kenny?
In favor.
Councillor Watson?
In favor?
Councillor Wells?
In favor.
Mayor Buckholge? In favor. The vote is 6 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried. Next is with regard to the official plan growth note. It's moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Belanger. Be it resolved that Committee of the Whole recommend that Council endorse the proposed budget change as outlined in the staff report, and that Committee of the Whole recommend that Council approve the 2019 contract portion in the amount of $68,125 in the current planning department budget, and the remaining budget amount of $115,592 for the 2020 and 2021 budget periods as a 2-year contract staff position with no increase in the overall budget amount currently proposed. Questions or comments? Councillor Wells.
Sorry, seems to be taking a lot of time today. I guess I'm wondering why we're doing this now. This to me seems like another pre-budget approval. And I guess as we're moving forward in the budget, I guess I'm asking, is this really necessary at this moment? you know, at the rate we're going, we won't need to pass a budget. We will have done it all through pre-budget approvals as we go forward. So I'm just questioning why it's happening now.
George?
Thank you, Worship. The intent wasn't to grant it approval, it was more to take a project that was in your budget, that was the official plan update and the zoning bylaw update at $200,000 each, and provide a little bit more detail with respect to how that would be executed. And looking internally and having discussion as part of around the budget was to say, well, perhaps instead of farming it out to consultants to do this work, that there would be advantages to the municipality to follow the process that's outlined in the staff report. The projects are still subject to council approval in the budget. It was just to outline to council, because it's there's a staffing component to it, that it was council whether there's a comfort level in dealing with it that way. So instead of consultants, we would hire a staff person to do a good portion of the work and still engage consultants to do other parts. So hopefully that explains why it's here today.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. It's I don't see the wording as particularly saying that, because it's saying recommend the council approve the 2019 contract portion in the amount of. So I was reading that as we're approving it today and not somewhere down the road as part of the budget.
Okay. Perhaps, Your Worship, with a slight modification to the wording, we can just clarify that point so that it's still subject to council consideration as the budget comes forward.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Bray?
Just if you keep reading the sentence, I think it's in there. It says in the current planning department budget.
But it does say we're approving the portion in the current planning department budget. In other words, we're approving it. Sorry, that's how I read it.
Okay, Councillor Belanger?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just through to Doug. Doug, my understanding is that this is a legislative expense that we are actually behind our schedule for the OP, and that so we have a timeline that this has to be done to meet provincial legislation. Is that not correct?
That is correct. There is a legislation that requires the town to have it enforced by, I believe, 2022. We do have a window on that. We're a little bit behind, but the rationale for this this report was simply to advise council that staff are taking a slightly different direction, where in the first request in budget submissions was $400,000 from reserves, just to go out to outside consultants. And we felt that there was an economy of scale to keep some of that work done in-house, and with a 2-year contract planner using those same monies, there are better efficiencies, and we can get more use out of that planner as well. So really that was the intent of the report, and
So
I appreciate Councillor Wells.
Okay, so just to add to my question, though, I don't think we had the luxury of reducing this budget item because we have to meet a certain deadline. Or maybe you can correct me if I'm.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Your Worship. The amounts that are quoted are based on costs that are standard costs to perform that type of an update. There's so much cost for a public open house, so much cost for a public meeting, so much cost for each report. So the 400,000 that is stipulated there has been projected based on standard cost to perform it.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Bray?
Thank you, and through you to Doug, would there also not be an advantage to keeping that information in-house? Like if you have one person working on it rather than a team of external consultants who are working on 5 different projects at the same time?
Thank you, Councillor, and through your Worship. There is decidedly an advantage. That's why we thought it was worthwhile to approach it by using a contract planner. Not only is there a continuation of that historical information, that mindset that stays in-house, but there are benefits during the vacation season, during July and August. There's an extra person to attend at the front counter, and so there are some decided spin-off benefits to hiring a 2-year contract planner.
So sorry, Councillor Foster.
Yeah, and I just want to, when you mention that, and you said the 2 studies for 200 grand. It's still coming out to 400,000 either way, right? There's no, when you talk economies of scale, I'm looking for savings. I know Councillor Wells would love it if we could find 50 grand right here. Is it gonna come out? Work with me, Stan, I got this.
I was thinking 200, actually.
Yeah. But I mean, is there any chance by doing it this way that, because you did mention economies of scale, and normally that means there's a cost saving to this. So is there potential for cost saving, or are we still gonna?
Perhaps the better wording would be there's better efficiencies that can be applied within the planning department. Rather than spending those $400,000 on an outside consultant and the money leaves town hall, that we spend the money inside town hall, and we can use that contract planner to beyond just what those $400,000 would be. Now, we have done an analysis, and we think that some of the modules that we would have gone outside, we can do entirely in-house with that contract planner. So efficiencies would be a better statement.
Okay, so if I may, just to follow up, so those efficiencies, if you're using that contract planner for other things, would those efficiencies result in dollars saved? I'm just, I mean, I'm we're passing a budget, not an efficiency audit. So I want to, you know, anything we can do to save money is a good thing. But I think what I'm hearing is
we're going to have the person in the office, and we're going to squeeze them for every little bit that they have. So Councillor Kinney hasn't spoken yet, so I'm going to go there. And then
just quickly, I wanted to just comment the factor that it seems like by doing this, we're getting more for our 400,000.
Yeah.
That is the intended
Not
wording.
monetarily, but in people power.
So there's been some friendly amendment suggestions, so if I can read that, and then if everybody's happy, we can maybe move on. That the Committee of the Whole recommend that Council receive the proposed budget change as outlined in the staff report, and that Committee of the Whole recommend that Council consider approving the 2019 contract portion in the amount of $68,125 as part of the Planning Department budget, and the remaining budget amount of $115,592 for the 2020 and 2021 budget periods as a 2-year contract staff position with no increase in the overall budget amount currently proposed. Does that deal with the concerns, Councillor Wells?
Yeah, I want to be clear, I support the direction.
Yeah.
The only place I was taking exception was the way it was worded. I perceived it as a pre-budget approval today to move forward with this, and that was where that was the only issue I was taking. I agree with the process, and I agree with the direction.
Okay, so these were friendly amendments. It was moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Belanger. Are you okay with those? Okay. One final.
No, that was going to be my comment.
Oh.
Who moved and seconded? It was just procedural. Thank you.
Okay, I've read it.
We'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Foster?
In favor?
Councillor Kinney?
In favor.
Councillor Watson?
In favor?
Councillor Wells?
In favor.
Mayor Byfolchi?
In favor.
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
I think we're just going to take a quick, like till 4 o'clock, 8 minutes. Run, and then we'll be back. Okay. Okay, we'll call this meeting back to order. Next, we have a report dealing with legal costs. It's moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Foster. Be it resolved that Committee of the Whole received the legal cost reports for the period covering 2014 through 2018 for information. Is there any discussion on those reports? Okay. Did you want to add to them? Oh, okay, go ahead.
I could, thank you. So these reports, they were brought forward on request regarding legal costs for the past period of 2015 through 2018. And in preparing that information, there was some other additional information requested to present the report by vendor. So you have in front of you an Appendix F, and that's adding the additional view of the report by vendor. And if you, when we did that report, we did have an amendment to Appendix A, which is why you have another copy of Appendix A in front of you now as well.
Okay.
And then if there were any questions or you wanted me to go through the report, that was fine.
Okay, so first off, I would ask, will these be uploaded to the website? You're doing that now? Okay, and then would this motion need to be in any way changed because this came to us after the fact?
Is it receiving for information? I can see.
Yeah, receiving for information. It's okay? All right, now I'll open it up to questions. No one? Councillor Belanger?
Yes, if I just had one comment. As I look at some of the legal fees and, you know, I would relate it to, you know, the kind of money we set aside for the Community Hub project. We were dealing with, although council has decided to go in another direction, a $648 million development that some of it related to. So although some of the numbers seem quite large when you compare it to other projects, I think that some of them, based on previous direction, were warranted, and obviously we're now looking to go in a different direction.
Anyone else? Councillor Watson?
Thank you, Worship. I guess just overall, I'm shocked at over $1 million spent on legal fees. But one in particular, I'm looking at the Integrity Commissioner line of $86,000, and did a little research on it. When you compare it back to the 4 years previously, it was $0, because there just was nothing, and they jumped $86,000 on there. Were these complaints mostly member to member or public? Does anyone know?
You want to speak to that?
Your
I
Worship.
can't quite remember.
Your Worship, there was a report that came forward from our previous Integrity Commissioner. That would probably be the best, is just to circulate that to members of council, because it did give a description in terms of where the complaints were generated from.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Councillor Foster?
And your Worship, I guess on that, or I was going to save these remarks to the next piece, but there's two things. The Integrity Commissioner is one. This is on Appendix D, by the way. The second one is council advice, and I assume the council advice is similar to what we're talking about in the next item on when we're talking about the budget. So I understand with the change, like council had the option of going to and receiving advice on items like you have now, the transparency statement. I know we're, you know, that's one piece that's there, but the Integrity Commissioner is looking at complaints or concerns that people have, whether it's public or internally. And I go, the numbers mind-boggling, but I do see that the next piece we're going to talk about council advice, and the budget's going to be significant on this. So I find it disheartening that the numbers were so large in this. That's historical. I'm not worried about it, but I mean, it is what it is. You can't change that. But looking forward, I think the council advice piece through the Integrity Commissioner will be an important piece, because the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act is now a book. I think it's 113 pages, and all of us don't have the legal ability to do it. So I was going to make the comments about that in the next issue, but I think it shows here that even back, you know, in this previous term, you're looking $20,000 is not insignificant. And anyway, we'll be seeing how that comes forward in the next item. But that's my comment.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Bray.
Thank you. Through you to the Treasurer. On, I guess, on any of them, if I look at Treasury or look at the paralegal that is linked to Treasury, it went from $0 in the first year to 2,000 to 25,000 to 50,000. Was that because we became landlords? Like there was suddenly a huge increase in Treasury legal services over the last 4 years, so that we're now spending $51,000 last year.
So through your worship, the major cost to the Treasury Department would be related to an assessment appeal that had to do with M&R lands.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be to do with the beachfront.
All right, any other questions? Councillor Wells?
Well, again, just to follow up Councillor Foster's comment, Integrity Commissioner, and I fully understand the need for an Integrity Commissioner, and I fully support the concept. But having sat through one session here earlier on, another session at the AMO, and then another session here just recently, I have to say that I really believe that these Integrity Commissioners, not identifying specifically ours, have somehow jumped on a change in the Municipal Act and have created a whole new fiefdom unto themselves, and which is, as they said at the AMO, going to cost municipalities a small fortune and is going to place any member of a municipal council at high risk for financial risk on a personal level. In listening to the Integrity Commissioners and what we should or should not do, or should not attend, or whatever, I can only reiterate that I think this is just another example where we are using a sledgehammer to kill a fly.
Okay, anyone else?
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Gray?
In favor?
Councillor Foster?
In favor.
Councillor Kinney?
In favor.
Councillor Watson?
In favor?
Councillor Walls?
In favor.
Mayor Byfolchi in favor. The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
Moved by Councillor Boulanger, seconded by Councillor Kinney, be it resolved that Committee of the Whole approve an amendment to the draft 2019 operating budget to increase the budget for Integrity Commissioner services by $15,000. Any further comments that haven't already been said? Councillor Foster?
Councillor Wells said I could go on.
Oh.
Anyway, no, again, just to build on what we said, I mean, literally, our involvement in churches, charities, not-for-profits can put ourselves at a conflict of interest. Earlier, I had to excuse myself because I sit on the Nancy Island board. And you go, for us to do our job effectively, I've asked, which is the first time I've ever written the Integrity Commissioner for anything, but I've asked for guidance on that. Because you go, for us, any of us to have to push away from the table for an item diminishes the council as a whole. There are legitimate reasons to do that, but if we're involved in a charity or a not-for-profit in a role that we've done for years and years, I'm worried that perhaps we're the fly and they're the sledgehammer. But anyway, those are my second set of comments. Same thing, different way. Thank you.
And I don't think we're the only ones who are feeling this way about it, and I would think at some point there will be some comments going back on these rules, because it is making it very difficult for anyone to run for council, be part of the community, and on one hand they're saying be involved in your community, even though you're sitting on council, but then they're turning around and saying we're going to get you if you don't declare, and it's getting really hard. Councillor Kinney?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I agree with Councillor Foster and Wells. My only comment is it's a new game. We don't control it. There's new rules, so we have to get up to speed on the rules. And just a thing to George, if I may, it says operating budget, increase the budget for Integrity Commissioner services by $15,000. So what does that bring it up to?
Worship, thank you. It brings it up to $30,000.
Okay. And just one more comment, that if we use the ticketing commissioner and we avoid lawsuits and all that kind of fun stuff, it might be money maybe we shouldn't be spending because of that, but it's money well spent if we utilize that, if you understand where I'm coming from.
Yep. Councillor Boulanger?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just for members of the public, is in attending the breakout session at Roma that spoke to this specifically, I would say 15,000 is a very conservative increase. They sort of said, hold on to your seats, buckle up, because it, especially given the fact that the integrity commissioners can now not only investigate, but for the first time prosecute, which is could be significant.
Okay, I've already read the motion.
We'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Foster?
In favor.
Councillor Kinney?
In favor.
Councillor Watson?
In favor?
Councillor Wells?
In favor.
Mayor Byfolchi?
In favor?
Vote 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
Moved by Councillor Watson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Bray. Be it resolved that Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that it approve the disbandment of the Economic and Tourism Department and the creation of 2 separate departments, Planning and Economic Initiatives Department and Building and Development Standards Department, effective upon Council approval. Further, that Economic Development Services be placed under the responsibility of the new Planning and Economic Initiatives Department. Questions or comments? Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Foster?
In favor.
Councillor Kinney?
In favor.
Councillor Watson?
In favor?
Councillor Wells?
In favor.
Mayor Byfolchi?
In favor?
Vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
Moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Watson. Be it resolved that Committee of the Whole receive the information report on the provincial, regional, county review, and further that if members of council have comments on the matter under review, they provide them to the mayor and the chief administrative officer. George and I will be meeting, having a meeting with them next week. The mayors for the losing my words, it's getting long in the day. The member municipalities of the county will be meeting with them, and there will be further reviews as we go along, but this will be the initial meeting with all the heads of council. We're allowed to bring 1 staff member with us, so hopefully when we get there, there's just 2 of them and not a full panel of people. But the county as well is looking at, we'll be having a workshop with the mayors and deputy mayors and staff members to kind of get a go-forward plan together, as opposed to you know, these meetings next week. We kind of got a heads up, it's happening on this day. Every head of council gets half an hour, and we're not quite sure what to expect out of it. So I think moving forward, there's still a lot of work to be done on it. I have heard from some of you already with your ideas, but definitely would welcome any thoughts on that moving forward. Comments, questions?
We'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Foster?
In favor.
Councillor Kinney?
In favor.
Councillor Watson?
In favor?
Councillor Wells?
In favor.
Mayor Byfolchi?
In favor?
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
Moved by Councillor Watson, seconded by Councillor Foster. Be it resolved that Committee of the Whole receive the information on the 2014 to 2018 staffing changes and related costs, review of proposed staffing additions as part of the 2019 operating budget for information, and further that Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that it approve the recommended staffing additions proposed as part of the 2019 operating budget. So we did have an in-camera document that goes along with this. If you want to discuss that, we would need to move in camera. Is there any questions in the open session? No? Okay, Deputy Mayor Bray?
I would just like to discuss a couple of things in camera if I can.
Okay, so we'll need a motion to go in camera. Oh, okay. It was just suggested because we have to go in camera at the end anyways, and maybe we could defer this to the end of the meeting, and then we'll just go in camera once. If everybody's okay with that?
Good idea.
Maybe the document will download by then.
Maybe. Okay, so we will hold off on that one. Next is moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Watson. Be it resolved, the Committee of the Whole received the verbal update on the status of the 2019 Draft 2 budget for information, and further the Council authorized staff to provide notice for the March 19, 2019 public meeting for the 2019 budget, with the budget proceeding for Council consideration on March 26, 2019. Questions, comments? George?
Thank you, Worship. Perhaps I'll ask the Treasurer to come to the table, and the Treasurer can give an update in terms of where we're at now with respect to the budget. Staff have been working and reviewing the budget since our last meeting, and there's certainly further review as we move forward, but thought Council may appreciate an update on where we're at right now.
Thank you, Madam Chair and CAO. So on the draft 2 of the budget, staff have continued to look for adjustments, and we have identified some reductions and some additional items that would need to go into the budget. So as of today, like when we were looking at the budget last time, we were at 3.26%. If we implement those changes that we would have, that we've identified so far today, we would be at 3.08%. So we have come down even further. These adjustments, they relate to expenses based on actual spending trends and some additional revenues that have been identified, and some changes resulting from some of the staff reports that you've seen today. We have looked at some of the comparators for other municipalities. We've received some information from them on some of the tax rates, and perhaps I could just circulate this. Just pass one each side, just for your information as we're proceeding. And there is a possibility that as we approach our final draft 3, that when we look at our blended municipal rate with the county and the education portions, that we might be a little bit lower as we were last year. There was room in the Simcoe County portion of the tax rate that was lower. We'll see that when we bring things forward on March the 5th. We will have a bit more information for you with regards to the estimate of the blended rate. And at this time, it would be what Council would like to do next as far as how to proceed forward.
Okay. Questions, comments, Jocelyn? Councillor Kinney?
Can we at this, through the chair, can we at this time suggest that staff look at an item that's on the staff 2 budget for consideration in either moving from taxation or into another form, or maybe deferring it to the next year? Can we do that now?
Sure.
Through your worship, is this the chart that you'd like to go through then? The one?
Yeah, that's the one.
Now, for today, we had reviewed the part of the chart last week, and we didn't have any detailed questions on that part. For today, I brought forward the staffing portion. Does that meet your requirement?
I think so. Can you flip down to item 50?
Item 50 would have been on the previous chart. So we can do that manually. I don't have it for the screen.
Yeah, if you can just identify which one it is. That's the one we got a couple of weeks ago, right? Yeah. So if you can just speak to the item and tell us which one it is, and then we can have that discussion.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Item 50, it's through the Department of Public Works. It is described as the 2nd Street Boat Launch Docking Facility. Short description of initiative is it is proposed to install a new floating dock facility at the end of 2nd Street Boat Launch. Fabricate, supply, and install constructed, and is estimated at $60,000. Additional cost to bring this project budget for 2019 is $75,000. In our initial binder, it was in the more description with regards to that it's a initiative that they thought about, but it's never, if my memory serves me correctly, something that wasn't really looked at as being needed. And I look at it as a nicety, but if we can save $75,000, it might get down to Councillor Wells' notch under 3%.
Jocelyn,
Just
do
for
you want to speak to
consideration.
that? So through your worship, I think it would be best if I let Kevin speak to that.
Kevin?
Madam Chair. Through you to Councillor Kinney. Yeah, so over the course of 2018, I know, let's go back a little further. Probably, I know before my time, 10 to 15 years ago, and Councillor Wells will certainly recall, we used to have docking facilities and docks positioned around 2nd Street as well as the Nancy lot, and for boaters, transient or otherwise, to park and visit Beach Area 1 and 2. Due to the low water levels, those were removed and were really never reinstated. They sat in the yard for literally 10 years. However, over the last probably 3 years, 4 years, we've seen the levels rise again, at which point we started to have those discussions yet again through River Resources Committee to reinstate those docking facilities. We presented a couple of concepts in August to Public Works Committee, and this was based on 2 previous discussions at River Resources Committee to try and reinstate those facilities. Now, the docking concept that we presented through this budget is really kind of a launching dock, as well as some docking space adjacent to the retaining wall at 2nd Street. And these docks are temporary. They're removed at the end of the season. And we have recommended that we're not necessarily doing improvements to the ramp, but rather just putting the docking facilities out perpendicular into the river and then along the wall itself. We're not anchoring these docks to the wall because of the condition of the existing retaining wall adjacent to the Ontario Parks property. So we're looking at really advancing some helical piles and then anchoring the docks to those piles, and try and reintroduce those facilities and provide that amenity to the public and the visitors for, from June through to September, October.
Go ahead.
My only comment to that is, do we really need it?
And I'm going to go to Councillor Wells.
Much as I appreciate your efforts on my behalf, Mark, to find me the savings, I'd have to say this is not an area that I would have chosen to look at. This goes back, as Kevin's already clearly estimated, this has come over several years as a probably one of the priority recommendations from the River Resources Committee. As you know, I wasn't involved in the last 4 years, but I've been involved with the River Resources Committee either as a member or as a council representative since its inception back in, I think it was 1992, somewhere in that range. And this has been a priority of theirs for a number of years, and it was the whole concept of transient boaters being able to come in and access the downtown area of Wasaga Beach for purchases, to walk down to the beach, for whatever reason they may want to come in and visit. We actually, as Kevin has said, we did have it many years ago, but the low water ended it because they just weren't accessible. The docks that existed before are not serviceable any longer. They were pretty much at the end of their lifespan at the time that they were removed from service. But this was a priority, and a priority that I personally support, only because I think it's important that we try to bring in some of the huge boat traffic and therefore the monies that travel with for retail spending by boaters that are on the Georgian Bay, and if they know that they can come in and dock for an afternoon or an evening, I think there is a potential economic benefit. The River Resources Committee's recommendations, unless they changed in the last 4 years, also were promoting an attempt, and I don't know where that's at today, an attempt to work with Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry to actually place additional transient dockages at the Beach 1 ramp just inside the mouth of the river for the same purpose, so that boaters could come in off the bay for access to the downtown of Wasaga Beach as an economic benefit. The sidebar to that is that it also provides a sort of a haven in the storm for boaters who may be on the bay, and as we all know, that bay can come up pretty quick to be less than safe for a smaller boat. This would provide a safe haven for boaters to come in off the bay as well if it were necessary. So I think personally, I believe it's time for us to start to try to access and benefit from the boat traffic that's out there. I mean, we've talked about a marina for 50 years in the river. I don't necessarily think it's feasible, but this is a starting point to get that boat traffic off the bay and coming into Wasaga Beach. And so I personally believe it's a worthwhile expenditure and would support it to going forward.
Kevin, what is the bridge clearance? What size of boat can come in there under it? Do you have the answer to that?
I do. I believe it's 3.68 meters clearance. That's the original design from 1960, but that's subject to fluctuating water levels. And I only know that because that question was posed earlier. I don't keep that type of information in my head. I wish I did.
Okay, next is Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Your Worship. And again, I want to commend staff that they've been able to tighten their belts on our behalf and get it from the original proposal down. The 3.08, I think it was again, there are some figures that just kind of jump out, and I'm going, we have, as councils will do, is sometimes you take on things that were deferred from previous years, and it puts you in a position where at some point you have to make a decision. A $500,000 fire truck is a significant hit that was delayed beyond its normal use. So sometimes you have to make the tough choices. I would suggest, or I would like to request, rather than looking at a specific item, that staff be challenged to take it down under the 3 somehow. And now I don't want to talk dollars, I want to talk efficiencies. So if we can get efficiencies that'll get us under 3%, but I don't want to pick on a department or a specific project. I think every department head has to go back and look and say, is this really the best we can do? Because if it is the best you can do, there will be an argument about it, and there will be discussion about it, and the public will have their chance, and you have to be willing to stand up. But I believe there's probably always a little bit of room to find something. So I would suggest that staff take a look in the mirror. If worst comes to worst, Danny, the new guy's here, it should come out of his department. Sorry.
I'm not on the levy.
And in discussions with the CAO earlier today, I believe staff are still looking and crunching and doing what they can do. So next on the list is Councillor Watson.
I think what's been said is said, so thank you.
Councillor Belanger.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just further to Councillor Wells, in attending the River Resource Committee, it was also related to the 2nd Street boat docks, is that we have a lot of residents that fish and have boats and guests, but it's very awkward now because when you actually launch your boat, there is no side dock, and it just it's not a good first impression for sort of a water community that you have to climb in up to your shoulders and then try to get into your boat in some cases. So it was certainly made very much a priority by the River Resource Committee. So.
Okay, Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess, and I had this discussion with Jocelyn earlier today, that I don't know, there's something about that number 3 that just psychologically I would like to see us get down below the 2, go down below the 3. I think you put you know, the CAO and all the department heads and the clerk and the deputy clerk in a room together.
You know they're chopping our pay, right?
Yeah, well, that's okay. You know, we still have to vote on it. But you know, I would like to hope that, you know, I would like to see us as we did historically, and did not do this year, Your Worship. But historically, we used to set a target. And ask staff to try to meet that target, and then if they couldn't, come back to us and tell us why they couldn't, and convince us that it was the best effort. We didn't set a target this year. I would like to see us setting a target of 2.5 as a reasonable tax increase. Now I realize that's tight, but when I look at 3.08 compared to 2.5, there's a difference of 0.58%, which equates to about $125,000 or $130,000. I'd like to think that in a budget of, you know, I'm talking operational side, not capital side, because capital side is mostly reserves anyway. But I think put our heads together, put department heads together, and say, can we find efficiencies, to use Councillor Foster's words, to the tune of about $130,000? That would get us down to the 2.5, and if they can't, they can't. And as somebody's pointed out, some of these expenses we were left with. I mean, every new government says that it's the last guy's problem. The last guy did it to us. Every government in history has used that excuse. But I think we can show some leadership and say, despite all of that, despite a deferral of a $500,000 fire truck, despite all of that, we can still come in at a reasonable amount, and to me the 2.5 is. So again, to repeat, if we put all the department heads in a room, I'm sure that the others can knock the fire chief down by $130,000, and we can move forward from there. So I'd like to set it as a target before the next round. If it can't be met, then it can't be met, but at least we've tried.
Well, and I think now that priorities and things have been set, after we get through this process, I'm assuming staff will be able to sit down and kind of look at what's up and coming over the next few years and kind of tell us where we're at now. Is that a fair?
So staff have still got, we'll be working on the forecast before the next draft 3, which comes out March the 5th. We haven't looked at that as a group yet, what would be deferred into those future years if we pull them out of the current year.
Okay.
So we would do that as part of this process.
Okay, Councillor Kinney.
Just really quickly, I want to thank Councillor Wells and Councillor Boulanger on updating me on the importance of the boat launch, because I didn't see it in the description, and heaven's sakes, it makes a lot more sense once you get that information, and I appreciate that. And finally, yeah, I'd really like to see it under 3 myself, 3%.
All right, any other? Deputy Mayor Bray?
Yeah, just a comment, for me, the number's less important than knowing we have a good budget. I know last year we had, or the last couple of years, we had a council initiatives account with about $200,000, which is the equivalent of a 1% tax amount. And I don't know that we spent it. I certainly don't remember things going through there in the final reports. But I mean, what we don't spend stays in the town. It's not like we have to spend everything we budget for. So.
Okay, any other comments? Read it again. Moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Watson. Be it resolved that Committee of the Whole received the verbal update on the status of the 2019 Draft 2 budget for information, and further that Council authorized staff to provide notice for the March 19, 2019 public meeting for the 2019 budget, with the budget proceeding for Council consideration on March 26, 2019.
Thank you, Worship. We'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Foster?
In favor.
Councillor Kinney?
In favor.
Councillor Watson?
In favor.
Councillor Wells?
In favor.
Mayor Bartolci?
In favor?
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. Motion is carried.
Thank you. Next is a closed session moved by Deputy Mayor Bray, seconded by Councillor Belanger. Be it resolved that pursuant to Section 239(2)(f) and (b) of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, the next portion of the Committee of the Whole meeting of February 12, 2019 will be closed to the public to receive advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege and to discuss personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees.
Roll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger.
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Bray. In favor. Councillor Foster.
In favor.
Councillor Kinney.
In favor.
Councillor Watson.
In favor.
Councillor Wells.
In favor.
Mayor Byfolchi. In favor. A vote of 7 in favor and 0 opposed. Motion is carried.
There's nobody out there, right?
No.
Okay.
Here to be.
Come on, crowded in Denise's office.
Your door's open. Oh. Okay, so it's moved by Counselor Watson, seconded by Counselor Foster. Be it resolved that Committee of the Whole receive the information on the 2014 to 2018 staffing changes and related costs. Review of proposed staffing additions as part of the 2019 operating budget for information. And further, that Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that it approve the recommended staffing additions proposed as part of the 2000, I think I'm supposed to read this one first, right?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm gonna start again. There's too many scribbles on here. Moved by Councillor Watson, seconded by Councillor Foster. Be it resolved that Committee of the Whole receive the information on the 2014 to 2018 staffing changes and related costs. Review of proposed staffing additions as part of the 2019 operating budget for information. And that the positions under item number 6, Small Business Development Officer, and item number 10 with regards to the event component be considered as contract positions. And further, that Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that it approve the recommended staffing additions proposed as part of the 2019 operating budget. George?
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to speak briefly to position number 14 on the public list that's in your package. And it has to do with a building inspector position, and the chief building official, I believe, has left, so he's not here to speak to this. We could proceed one of two ways. We could, I could further speak to that, or the chief building official can come and speak to that position number 14 at the March 5th meeting. However, committee wants to address it. Basically, the conversation was whether we needed to keep that position in the budget or not. It doesn't have a tax impact because it's funded through fees, but the chief building official and I were speaking about that, and what we were going to propose is that it be taken out of the budget, but I was going to, the chief building official was going to speak to that, but he's not here to speak to it today, so we could leave it in at this particular point, and we could have him speak to it at March 5th if that's the will of council. As I said, it doesn't have any budget impact, it's just more of a deletion of a position going forward. The other positions outlined in the building department would continue through the budget process.
Okay, we'll wait till he can be here then.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, we'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Foster?
In favor.
Councillor Kinney?
In favor.
Councillor Watson?
In favor.
Councillor Wells?
In favor.
Mayor Beckholz in favor. The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. Motion is carried.
And it's moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Belanger. Be it resolved that Committee of the Whole confirm the direction provided to staff in closed session pertaining to the legal update on agreements.
We'll call for vote. Councillor Belanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Foster?
In favor.
Councillor Kinney?
In favor.
Councillor Watson?
In favor.
Councillor Wells?
In favor.
Mayor Beckholz
In favor?
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. Motion is carried.
Okay, thank you everybody. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
I don't like to put it on your desk.
I can
I know what you're looking at, Gina, but you're
My
terrified.
computer just went,
Nine.
ugh, thank you, transport error, and I'm like, don't do that.
I can
Full screen of death.
the screen.
Oh, yeah. Oh, let's,